because after all of this, I would not at all be surprised if for whatever reason the live streaming feature was just broken.
Yeah.
So I will get an email telling me that we're live. I will check Twitter and make sure that we're live. Sorry about this, guys. Thank you for bearing with us. Of course, Restream always hates me at the most inopportune times. We're live on Twitter. So if we're live on Twitter, we should be live on YouTube. Everything should be working. Give us a shout out in the comments if you see us, if you hear us, if everything works right. Welcome to the show, David Gornoski. It has been a bit of an ordeal to get started here, but we're here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Okay, good on YouTube. All right, looks like we are good to go. All right. Thank goodness. All right, this show has been this is one I've been looking forward to for a very long time. David, I said in the last show that I did, I mentioned that we were going to be having a conversation, and I said I think that if I remember back to, I have a memory of listening to a podcast of yours, and based on where I lived at the time, it must have been 4 years ago. So I've been following you for a long time, and since you were on since you were on terrestrial radio. Since then, as I understand, you've left the terrestrial radio
for now
situation for now. What I think the majority of my audience already knows very well who you are, but for anyone who happens to not, give a little introduction and tell us who you are and what you're about, what you're working on.
Well, I'm David Gornoski, and I try to focus on bringing back an understanding of anthropology, or bringing to, for the first time, in many cases, churches that have never really considered a proper anthropology of the Bible. And then I bring it into the future with, and I don't like the word Christian futurism, and I think we're going to have to ban anybody that uses the word Christian futurism from any kind of conversation in this topic, but because it's not about Christian, it's like really, that's kind of redundant, right? And Christianity built the future. Christianity built history. And let's just take these terms back. History is what Christianity created, and the concept of a future is what Christianity created. I went on Uber Boyo. Have you heard of his channel on YouTube?
Yeah, that conversation. I was raving about that conversation on here.
And then somebody said, "No, Christianity didn't create the future. Zoroastrianism is." And I said, "Oh my goodness, we're gonna tick off those 5 Zoroastrians over in Iran. We love them. Very, very nice, beautiful fire displays and everything. But I'm sorry, you guys didn't create the future. Jesus did." So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing that we work on. We have different programs. A Neighbor's Choice is that's my standard vehicle. That's my Model T, that gets you in the dealership. And if you want that step up, we go into things hidden, and we do more of an anthropology there. And then we get into, for those who want to, one of those incarnational action points about how to think like epistemologically, how Jesus would think. Then we take on nutrition science, right? That's an easy way to start with the Seed Oil Survival spinoff series. Then we have The Science, which was a series that I started about the pandemic thing with all the great voices in that world. And then we have Science and You, which is probably my most far out part of my podcast constellation, which is where we get into new physics with my chief science advisor and physicist, Dr. Yu. And as we say, you don't need a rocket scientist to figure these things out, but just in case, we bring him along for the ride. So it's like a 1980s adventure movie designed as a podcast. And I think, what we're trying to do is really going to be the new university, right? This is the way university should be. We should be having ideas cross-pollinate. We should allow for free discourse, and it has to happen in the podcast world because we have failed to enact anthropological-based incarnational action to the point where we now have to do these things in exiles on podcasts, which is fine. But at some point, this is the place. This is the kind of thing that needs to be happening in every church and every university and every place around town. We need to have coffee shops. We need to have bars, if that's your thing. We need to have roundtable salons, okay? We need to have salons. We have a lot of these. If you read Fire in the Minds of Men by James Billington, he was the former Library of Congress director. He documents firsthand primary sources on the origins of all these revolutionary movements like nationalism and socialism. He looks at them in Europe, and they're all being developed in the salons of the aristocrats. They're all being developed with occult themes behind it. And Christians need to have that same mindset. We need to be having salons. We need to be having salons about anthropology. We need to be having salons about what does the cornerstone mean. We need to be having all this stuff, hashing it out, and stop trying to be like my team is the best, and all we're going to do is talk about how great our team is. That's not going to work. Okay, there's plenty of Pharisees to go around. We don't need any more Pharisees. We need Christians now, right? We need incarnational people. They're not going to talk about how pure and wonderful their version of Christianity is. We need people who are willing to heal the nations. Baptizing the nations means bringing out and revealing the truth with action. If there's no action, you've got another ideology, you've got another fake religion. Christianity destroys those religions. So
there's if you think about the word Christian, this is an interesting thought I had the other day. You think about the word Christian, and it's kind of become, it's one of those words that you use the word so much that it almost loses its meaning, because it just becomes kind of a, I talk about on the show sometimes the distinction between mouth sounds and mind pictures. Mm-hmm. And when we communicate, what we're doing is I have a mind picture and I'm making a mouth sound to correspond to that mind picture to try to make you have the same mind picture. And so words are these different little arbitrary mouth sounds that we use to convey those mind pictures, which is the ideas. So the idea of a Christian, originally Christians were known as followers of the way. And then the term Christian was actually a pejorative that was used because you are a Christian. You are a follower of Christ. Mm-hmm. But it was in a pejorative sense, that because Christ is this pathetic figure to the people who are using this term originally. Mm-hmm. He's this supposed God who dies this humiliating death and then disappears. And then his followers are going around, and his followers are these weird people who seem to be a part of this death cult that emphasizes the opposite of the virtues of the society around them. But our Christian has kind of become, today, when we use the word Christian, when we use the mouth sound Christian, we're not conveying the idea of a Christian anymore. We're conveying the idea of a Christian-ian, where now being a Christian is acting like this, kind of like a meme of what a Christian is, versus being the actual living incarnational embodiment of Christ, being a Christian. So it's like you take that Christian word and substitute it for Christ, and now everyone's acting like a Christian. But what does it mean to be a Christian has gotten lost in all of that.
Right. Yeah. It reminds me of that ancient graffiti, Alexmenos. Have you heard of that? Alexmenos graffito, where it's about Alex worshiping his God, and it was in ancient Rome. Alexamenos graffito. I hope I'm saying that, whatever. But it's in Latin, that's it. But it's a picture of this Christian. They were mocking him, the pagans, mocking him worship Jesus, and the figure. It's this little crude graffiti that was found in the Roman walls, and it's Jesus has a donkey head, right? Which kind of shows you that's what pagans do, is they have to try to scandalize, because Jesus was disrupting some of the differentiation of what, their world was aware of in terms of what is power, what is good, what is evil, what is clean versus unclean. Different notions of pagan deity are disrupted. And so therefore a pagan's going to respond by trying to partially mythologize Jesus with a donkey head, right? Because he rode on a donkey, right? So that becomes mythology. And then also there were the people of the donkey was in that area where he comes from, in that ancient Israel. So it's interesting that the Canaanites were like pejoratively known as like donkey worshipers. And then Jesus comes on a donkey, and then they try to mythologize Jesus as like a donkey, like an insult. Like, this is what a goofball that you would worship a donkey being crucified. What a fool you are. And that's what Paul talks about, that the cross is this is an offense to the world, right? It's a scandal and an offense. And that's kind of what you're going to see as a result of that offense, is this kind of attempt to try to put it back into a mythological framework that they can process.
Because if you have a donkey, if you're someone who rides a donkey, it's because you're of too few means to have a horse, to ride a horse. So there's kind of that latent, like, it's like a cosmopolitan. You're a backwards hillbilly that is simple, has a very simple, unsophisticated view of the world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Right.
that's yeah. I mean, and really, it's those who are owned by the crowd that have a simple worldview.
Right.
Unfortunately,
Right.
all we like sheep have gone astray, each into our own way, which is the joke, right? Because like a sheep, in some sense, if you're not aware that you're a sheep, then you think that you're going your own way, right?
Mm.
You see what I mean? You think you're
Yeah.
going your own way. That's what the message of that, it's like once you become aware of your sheepness, then you become aware of how you were walking. Even though you were moving your little hooves, it wasn't really you that was moving. It was the herd moving you towards a cliff or towards a wolf or towards destruction, right? And so, that's the whole idea of leaving the 99 and going after the one, right? Is that encountering that has so many layers to it. The scapegoat, the misfit, the one that's left, the one that's marginalized, the stone that's rejected, the sheep that's left behind. The shepherd goes for that one. And it's almost like that's a psychological state of encountering Christ, right? Is the recognition that you're all alone now, in the sense that you're awake to the matrix of being a sheep. So the
Right.
shepherd goes to save you in that state, right? That state of being the one left out of the 99, right? And so there's that layer there that I think is helpful, that we need to take back. I mean, Soren Kierkegaard said the crowd is a lie, and I think that's a great place to start. And when you understand what it means to be Christian, right, is that it's like encountering what does that mean to live in that reality, like, and then there's this huge creative space that opens up for you to that now start to not fall off into every stupid conspiracy theory and alternative theory, but to be really like artful and thoughtful and being able to unpack and challenge some of the assumptions, right, of that have been given to you in the world. And that's where you can start to be able to be creative and innovative in a Christian sense. That's what Rene Girard said, that we didn't stop burning witches because we discovered the scientific method. We discovered the scientific method because we stopped burning witches. So it's the other way around. The way we talk about the scientific method, it's as if it fell down from on high. It just fell down from the heavens. And the Enlightenment, we're just all of a sudden, boom, we had the religious wars, and then boom, all of a sudden from the heavens, reason came. That's not necessarily the case. I mean, there's things to critique about the Enlightenment, but I think that's important for us to not get into those stupid traps where we're pro or anti certain periods of history, right? This is all redemptive history, and there's, we're growing in fits and starts, and we fall down and we spiral back up, and there's a lot to it. And I don't like to try to pick a era of redemptive history and say we need to go back here and nothing further because that was the golden age. Like, that's a very pagan way of thinking about Christianity, right? For whether we like it or not, Christianity is a future oriented reality. It's a future oriented choice, to choose to live in the present as you said earlier, a down payment on the future, like a down payment on what's to come. He starts off his first miracle that way, in the miracle of Cana, where usually you bring out the garbage wine, the box wine, at the end of the wedding party when everybody's been sloshed, and he brought out the best wine, the best tasting wine at the end, which kind of shows where history is now going to be oriented in the kingdom of Christ, whereas the golden age was always in the past in the pagan world. So that's why you brought out the best wine at the beginning, and then it subsequently goes downhill from there until you're kicking people out of the wedding. Come on, get out. We have nothing but box wine. Let's go. And Jesus doesn't do that. That's how pagan think. That's how pagan thinking goes, right? Let's go. We can't do this anymore. We got to go back. We can only go back through some kind of like sacrificial propitiation, to let the gods know that we're sorry for being so ruckus or whatever the issue is. That's not how, Jesus is going to do it. He's going to go in a comedic pattern, which is the best is yet to come. History ends and culminates in a wedding, and that's how comedies end, right? With a funny wedding at the end. So
That's
we're divine comedy is what we're all about,
That's a perfect segue into. So I told you I planned to lead off the show here with a clip from a conversation that you had with my good friend Buck Johnson, and you segued into that perfectly. One of the things you've said in the past is to kind of set up this clip here. One of the things you said in the past is how the Bible begins in a garden and it ends in a city.
Right.
And I titled the episode here, "Building the City of God in the Third Millennium," because something that you said in another recent podcast of yours was it was the one Jesus and the Cornerstone event. And you talked about what the cornerstone is, what the role the cornerstone plays, especially vis-a-vis the capstone, and the symbolic meaning of the cornerstone and what it means for Christ to be the cornerstone. And in the email I sent you to try to set up the interview here, and then just before we went live, I was talking about how I began this show as a explicitly political. I saw myself as an explicitly political unit and viewed the world through a political lens, as an ANCAP kind of turning monarchist, largely through the influence of guys like Curtis Yarvin, or Mencius Moldbug more than Curtis Yarvin, if you catch my meaning. And as I was beginning this process, I began as I was going through this process, I was exposed to Orthodoxy, Eastern Orthodox Christianity. And it was primarily through Lord of Spirits, a podcast by Ancient Faith, that what drew my interest about that was, number one, the idea as the show was pitched to me by the people who shared it with me. They said, you're interested in metaphysics. Well, this is a really interesting look at Christian metaphysics that you've probably never encountered before growing up in the West, I spent the first 20 plus years of my life as a pretty devout Seventh-day Adventist. Which is a, relatively speaking, extremely young tradition.
Were you vegetarian?
And yes, yeah, for a large part of my life. I was not for the most part.
Tucker Goodrich, the keto friend of mine, the nutrition guy, he blames the Seventh-day Adventists for a lot of our nutrition.
Harvey Kellogg.
Yeah.
Harvey Kellogg, when he invented cornflakes, the reason that he did it, one of his stated purposes for it was to stop children from masturbating, stop little boys from masturbating. He said they needed to eat cereal because bacon and eggs and steak was too sexually provocative. So it's very, Seventh-day Adventism is very, I mean, now it's just completely degenerating into postmodern progressive nonsense, but that's because it's always been a very conservative denomination that has these auspices of conservatism that's very legalistic, and that just falls apart without the true incarnational heart of Christ. But so you had this conversation with Buck recently, and it really got some gears turning for me, because I've been doing the show kind of off and on for the last year and a half after being very regular with it, because I find myself just not having anything to say. I don't know what. I'm trying to figure a lot of this stuff out for myself. I went through my process as a catechumen, and so then I just felt like I'm just not in a place to talk about a lot of these things. I need to be focused on other stuff. But I've had this passion burning for my perception of the absence of a particular message that needs to be out there. That's not strictly quote unquote Christian preaching. It's not just the kind of rote Western preaching of the gospel, standing on the street corner, talking about hellfire, and like there needs to be something there needs to be a positive message here. But I don't know exactly what that positive message is. And in this clip here that I'm going to play real quick, it's about a minute and a half, and I've got it on 1.25 speed, so it shouldn't take too long. In this clip here with Buck, you had a monologue that just has been embedded in my mind, and it's interesting that you said what you did about Rene Girard and talking about how we discovered the scientific method because we stopped burning witches, because you said that either in this clip or just before this clip.
Yeah.
So let me play this real quick, and then we'll riff off of it.
Recognizing, right? So what I'm saying is there's so much work to be done in the world of atoms, and that Christians should be leading the way in that. They should be incarnating the truth of God. Being able to think smarter like Jesus means being able to challenge sacred cows and then look for the things that actually work. You know, Rene Girard says that we didn't stop burning witches because we discovered the scientific method. We discovered the scientific method because we stopped burning witches. But what that means is that Christianity is what reveals the emptiness of sacrifice. And when you start to lose your believability in sacrifice, you'll still keep doing it for a time, but it'll lose its ability to unify. It'll lose its ability to create cohesion and meaning. And when that happens, you start to look around and say, well, maybe something else caused this plague. Let's look at that growth on that dead body right there on the nose and see what that is. Is that? And then they say, well, how do we do that? Let's get a piece of glass. You start creating technology. Those technologies end up becoming used for a whole host of different things. Christianity is the place where technology comes. Christianity is the place where technology comes and heals people, not destroys and creates more opportunity for war. So Christians should be leading science. Christians should be healing cancer and all these diseases as down payments on their authority as given to them by Christ to be kings and priests of this world. That's what we should be doing. Our conservative political conferences should be talking about curing cancer.
All right.
So that was the that last sentence the idea of the working of signs and wonders as down payments on our authority as given to us by Christ to be kings and priests. That is the phrase that has just been going around in circles in my head ever since I heard you say that. Can you, so in the light of the current debate about technology, particularly AI, there's this kind of never-ending debate about technology is good, technology is evil, technology is good, technology is evil. It sounds to me like what you're saying here is that technology isn't good or evil. Technology is. The question is, how is it going to be used? And Christians have a sacred responsibility in the use of technology. And technology can be something as simple as a relationship. A relationship can be a form of technology. Language is a form of technology, all the way up to AI or a wheel loader or a crane. All of these things are different forms of technology. Elaborate for me on that idea. What is your vision for the role of Christians in society, particularly with respect to technology?
Well, it's like you have with the Enlightenment, you get things like deism popping up, and it's like this separation of the divine from the created. So it's trying to like roll back incarnational reality and make God like a distant father figure, which a lot of people in the Enlightenment grew up with. So it's in keeping of what they were experiencing. Theology is biography sometimes. And so, you've got this kind of separation of matter from spirit, and dualism is wrapped into that. And there's a lot of stuff that are wrapped into that. But, that's Descartes, I think, therefore I am. That's where you get this distinction between mind and body, and then spirit and material and things like that. And so that sets this thing in motion that decouples the material world from the spiritual world and the idea world. And we've been lost in that for a long time, I believe, and our theology reflect even the fact that we study the Bible with the first imprint. When you are told to read a Bible or wherever tradition you're from, I pick on all traditions. Okay. So I'm not going to do any tribalism stuff. I mean, I know, look, there's always a place to love your family, and it's okay to love your family, including your tradition too. But just to, there's always this kind of like, okay, we have this Bible, and what are we told about this book? Teaches us about what? God.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we've already, Jesus said, "Son of God, Son of Man," right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've already not listened to what he said from the moment we present reading the Bible. Okay, this is what it means to be like, follow God. Tell me what to do. Tell me the rules. Tell me whatever the tradition is, or tell me the secret hermeneutic that allows me to pick the right team so I can say everybody else is wrong. You're already starting from a detached, disembodied Jesus, which is no Jesus at all. It's a wonder we've gotten this far in the first place with such a truncated view of Jesus. So we should look at the Bible as, what does this teach us about mankind? What does this teach us about relationships? What does this teach us about the way I have this feud with this guy from high school? That's what kids should be learning. You should be learning anthropology, mimetic theory to understand why is I have this big issue with this person. I can't stand them. Well, the Bible's there to teach you about that. So it reads you more than you read it. And so it has a kind of existential thing, but it also has this big cosmic thing, and this and God designed this earth to be his home. That's important, like God designed, he designed this to be his tabernacle, his place of rest. And it's important for us to not worship the map or to worship the icon over the created. And we're not even supposed to worship the created thing, but the point is it should all be put in its proper place. All
Right.
these are signs pointing back to something else. So creation was designed to be a reflection of God. It was designed to be his home. We were made in his image. We were made to be a kind of co-creative reflection of Jesus, reflection of the word. And so that's what we're supposed to do. So here's why I'm saying all of that, just to say, I have an issue with some of the ways in which Christians smuggle in this disconnect again when it comes to things like signs and wonders. And there's two, let's just give two examples of how this works. There's the one that says, don't tell people to be like Jesus. You're not Jesus. Who do you think you are? Shut up, sit down. Okay, well, by doing that, you're rejecting Christ. The Spirit of Christ is being rejected in that mindset. People are so afraid, and they'll always use the boogeyman of like cult leaders and Jim Jones, or, you know, all these different figures like, what's that guy? Charles Manson, you know, like, that's what it looks like to think you're like Christ. It looks like that crazy stuff, right? And so they use that as like a fear mechanism to stay in the boat while Jesus is walking on water. If I walk on water, I'm going to look like Charlie Manson. Or I might get trampled down and mutilated by a mob, or put in prison and accused of the most heinous crimes known to man, right? Falsely accused, falsely scapegoated, falsely maligned, destroyed. My family might fall apart. I can't walk on water. That's Jesus. And I'm going to sit in the boat and I'm going to be his biggest fanboy ever. That's what Christians do. Do you see what I mean? That's what they do. They do it with every fiber in their being. They stay in the frickin' boat 2,000 years later. They stay in the boat. That's the way they should not be doing, but that's what they do because they can feel safe and pious and holy. I worship Jesus in the boat better than you do. I know the right tradition. I know the right doctrines. I know the right ritual. I know the right baptism. I know all that. You don't know it, and they're over there. No, I know this, blah, 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 blah. And you're all, you know, trying to show off who's worshiping. Oh, man, look how awesome he is. See how he walked on the water? And then you come up with your theory about how he's walking on water while the other guy's like, no, I think it's this way. And you're like, no, it's not that way. You're spending all your time in the boat. You ain't doing nothing. You're not being Christian. Christianity is you get the heck out of the boat and you be Christ. You become Christ. So instead of making Jesus an object of your life that you put in your pocket and say, I've attained it because I've joined this church, or I've joined that thing, or I've done this type of baptism, or I've done that type of thing. No, you become, Jesus is the subject of your life. See the difference? You know, when they talk about like, don't objectify women, don't objectify Jesus. Don't objectify Jesus. He's not something to attain. And the reason why we like that is because it's safer. It's safer to attain him as an object of your desire rather than the subject of your life that you are becoming. You are made in his story. History is Jesus's story, and he is divinely creating he's weaving a story with each of us, a reflection of him in its own in different ways, unique way. And we get
the church is the body of Christ.
Right. And he said, we're going to do greater things than he, and people still don't believe it. They still think he's just being cute. He was being really sweet to us. He's patronizing us like that. A boy, one day you'll throw the ball bigger than daddy. That's what we all believe in our bones. Because if we believed it, we wouldn't be sitting around whining about things. We don't believe it, man. We don't believe it. So all we do is we spend all of our time talking about Epstein Island and and how come Hunter Biden doesn't go to prison, and how come the Federal Reserve, how come all we do is complain because we're afraid to get in the water, because we're afraid we're going to drown or whatever else, right? We don't believe it. We don't trust in him. We don't trust in his way, and we don't want to become him. You know, theosis, right? We don't want to try that. So we just try to just be holy and pious and talk about how reverent and how, you know, my goodness, it's this dogma, it's that thing, and look at me, I'm doing all the things right. And it's like, okay, but that's not what he's doing. You know, he's out there taming the wildness of reality. He's taming it. He's showing he owns it. He wants you to play in that world. He wants you to play in taming the storm of reality. make it
Hmm.
your sandbox to play co-creatively with him, right? And so once you get that part, then you see how there's this mistake we make when we say that healing only comes through like, so this is where it's interesting, right? So let's get into the healing thing, because you asked about signs and healing, signs and wonder. So let's get into the healing part. Within that framework of this disconnect, started with this, didn't start, but I'm trying to put an arbitrary marker in the history to kind of put a narrative to it. Deism disconnects creator from created, makes it separate. There's daddy issues going on in this theology. That's baked into the cake of a lot of different things that come out later. Theism, classical forms of theism also have a kind of dualism. So there's errors there, but what does that do? Disenchants the world, and then it allows you to be blind to mimetic encasing of truth, right? Because your focus is all on, man, he's so holy, he's so awesome, and I believe in all these things in your head, but you're not acting it out. You're not walking on water, so therefore you're not following Christ in its full potential. So when you get to healing, then you get to this disconnect where it's miraculous healings by laying of hands and prayers and miraculous things happening supernaturally, or it's just whatever the heck the doctor does. Or if you're kind of anti-establishment, then it's whatever the heck your natural doctor does, or whatever your chiropractor. That's it. That's it. So it's either supernatural stuff, or you pick the establishment line, which is whatever the official doctor, AMA, government approved establishment protocol is for this particular disease. Or you get the little, I'm medically against that. So then you pick a silo in opposition to that, chiro, whatever, and that's your thing. And no attack to any of that. But you're not thinking about healing in that big incarnational action framework, right? Which would be looking at how do you start actually curing these diseases, like actually working through using your mind, using your hermeneutic of suspicion to be distrustful of some of the established paradigms about textbook knowledge about what diseases are and how to solve them. So when you don't have that kind of hermeneutic of suspicion pushing you forward, you won't have the courage to see what's right underneath your nose. You see what I mean? And that's what I'm trying to get you to see, is that Christianity is about learning how to look and see and act as Christ did in the world. Taking on the mind of Christ, renewing your mind, right? It's not about looking at him as an object in the text and then following certain protocols to show how right your thinking is. That's important. But it has to be anchored in what are you actually doing to enact a different frame of mind in which you can look at something that says, well, this is what we do for diabetes. It's X, Y, and Z that the government protocols and everybody goes through. Instead of saying, okay, what actually solves diabetes? Using your mind, using your suspicion of the established dogmas that are telling you where you're allowed to play and where you're not allowed to play, and saying, this is a stronghold. This is an example of sickness. This is an example of sin. This is an example of violence embedded in our system, creating distorted outcomes like false, fake solutions for diseases that have us in bondage for generations. See what I mean? So do you get what I mean? It's like, there is a place, of course, for supernatural divine healing, not taking that away. But when you take a disconnect, right? When you disembody the message of Christianity, when you separate creator from created, what do you get? You're going to get, well, there's exceptional examples where there's a supernatural healing taking place in the church, or then there's just whatever the established textbook view of healing is. Does that make sense?
Right. I've just finished reading I did a live reading series on the show here of Father Seraphim Rose's book, Nihilism, The Root of the Revolution of the Modern Age. And in the book, he talks about what he calls the 4 stages of the nihilist dialectic. And he traces them. He kind of does what you did, where for a narrative's sake, because human beings, we're narrative beings. Our entire awareness of reality is constantly embedded in narrative. And he picks sort of an arbitrary point to start. And
Mhm.
so his 4 stages are liberalism, realism, vitalism, and then the nihilism of destruction. And the way he lays these out is that liberalism, the stage, begins with like a falling away from devotion to the idea of an absolute truth, where truth becomes something that is not, they're not explicitly hostile to the notion of truth, but they're kind of ambivalent to it or sort of aloof from it. But that ends up being each stage of the nihilist dialectic lays the foundation for the next stage, which is in a sense a reaction to the previous stage, but it's actually a furtherance of this previous stage because it accepts the core tenets of the previous stage, but says you're doing it wrong.
Right.
So realism is the response to liberalism, where realism says, no, none of this like kind of aloof, detached liberalism, this wishy-washy and milquetoast. No, we're going to be explicitly hostile to the notion of truth. We're going to be rigidly materialist. There's not even going to be a metaphysical awareness. Just simply eliminate the possibility of metaphysics and focus rigidly on rationalism, humanism, etc. And that then lays the foundation for the vitalist response, which is where the vitalist says, no, you're a bunch of detached nerds who are buried in your spreadsheets. You don't understand the spiritual realities of human nature because they're sensing this detachment from the spiritual world. But then because in the earlier stage, absolute truth had been, humanity had detached itself from a notion of absolute truth, which absolute truth is a person. Humanity had detached itself from that person. So the vitalist response becomes all these sorts of weird pseudo-spiritual. This is where you start getting into the New Age. And then kind of on the right-hand side, you'd have like the Evolas, perhaps. And on the left-hand side, you would have like Foucault or Derrida or some of the French postmodernists. Then the nihilism of destruction is basically where we're at now, where not only are we now abandoning or hostile to absolute truth, but we're like explicitly at war with it. There's an explicit declaration of war against God. He uses Nietzsche, obviously, as the paradigmatic nihilist, but there's this open warfare against God. But then he lays out the nihilist plan, which is you've created a vacuum. By killing God, you create a vacuum, and something has to step into that vacuum. So what you're going to get then is a new God, and then the desire to create a new world for a new man to dwell within. But that new man is now no longer an incarnational man. That new man is an idea. It's strictly an idea that has no tangible basis. So it's actually driving humanity into subhumanity. Where the nihilism of destruction is the stage we're reaching now, where you're getting human beings are being genetically changed to the point where you can begin questioning whether you could even consider, like scientifically, whether you could even consider this a human being, or has it been genetically changed sufficiently where you can no longer call it a human being? Is theosis possible with someone who is genetically no longer human? We're at the level
If you have like
now,
a pig face one day or something, like a Ninja
Right.
Turtle character.
right? Yeah. I mean, if you have a pig heart and then you like
And can
grow
Jesus save a pig
lizard
heart?
tail,
Can
right?
Jesus come inside a pig heart?
Right,
that's
yeah.
the takeaway question from today.
Right. So you're talking about this dualism
Yeah.
here and the deism stage where man begins to treat God as this kind of far off, distant, like you said, it reflects the daddy issues. And that's actually, there's something even more profound in that I think that we could get into, where the show is called King Pilled. What does it mean to be a king? Where does kingship reside? Who is the ideal king? What does the ideal king look like? How does he behave? And I would contend that the king, the true king, is the man who comes up to a mud puddle and nobody can get across the mud puddle. So he lays himself down in the mud puddle so everyone can walk on top of him across from dry land to dry land. Kingship is a sacrificial act. The king is subject to his people. And that's something that doesn't begin from the top down, in the sense that you're not going to install a king and magically transform the people.
Yeah. That's
It
what all
starts
these
from the
right-wing
people.
guys want. I call them the
Right.
little Caesars. Yeah.
Right. And that was the ideology that was drawing me, that was pulling me, but there was
Yeah,
something about it that just didn't seem
yeah,
right.
the name King Pill. I thought, oh my goodness, we're gonna get another monarchist. Oh my goodness. But you're just falling into another, playtime.
Right. You're not.
fantasy,
You can't.
you know.
You can't. You
It's like
can't
it's like a
mistake
video
the
game, you know. You're just playing a virtual reality. Oh. And
right,
it's the
which
same
is
thing. Like, you know, it's the same mistake. I mean, I hate this when these people make the same mistake, and we all do. So I don't want to be. I've got to be careful. I never want to be. You know, it's easy to get in the flesh and say these people, but
right.
we all do it. But make the same mistake that the freaking people of Jesus' time did, right? They're like, no, I don't want you. I want a king. Dang it. I want a Messiah. It's like, and then 2,000 years later, you got these people saying, I'm a Christian nationalist. And you're like, okay, well, love your neighbor as yourself. No, beat them, put them in prison. We need to come back with crucifixions, and then we love Jesus. I'm like, no, dude, you totally missed it. Man, I'm sorry. You just totally didn't get it. And they do that because, again, there's all kinds of ways to objectify Jesus as an object, as a part of your kind of pantheon of your ideology, rather than making him the subject, right? The subject of your life that you're becoming like, and you're actually doing it yourself, right? I mean, you know, that's totally missed when you take, because they always do this, and this might step on toes, but a lot of people love to do that thing where, oh no, you know, when Jesus was doing his ministry, that was the mode of the suffering servant. But when he comes back, he's going to be like Macho Man Randy Savage with an elbow from the top. Bam! I told you I was trying to be nice the first time, and no, brother. All right, I had to do a wrestling thing because I know Parker, somebody asked for wrestling, so there we go. But that's what it is. You know, Jesus tried. I'm coming in as a real nice guy the first time, and then I'm going to come in with an elbow drop just to show you what a punk you were for picking on such a nice guy. That's Christian theology in a nutshell, and the way people do it. You know. Because they can't handle the radicalness of Christ. They're terrified it's going to put them on the cross. That's what it's all about. And they want that postcard. I told you, they want the postcard Christianity where they put their face in the cutout of the cross at the carnival. And they get their photo and they say, look, I'm a Jesus Christian follower. Look at me. They don't want to they don't want to be on the cross. They want to get the photo. They want to have the postcard Christianity, so they can make it look like they're with him, get all the social status of being an ally of victims, right? And that's on the right too. The right has plenty of allies of victims. They just don't use that language because they're like, you know, they're not honest with themselves, right? And
that's been my big grievance with a little ironic here. That's been my big grievance with the mentality that runs in a lot of the race realist circles, where it's turned into, you see these posters who 100% of their content is how white people have been victimized in all these different ways. And to me, it doesn't matter whether that's true or false. All you're doing is just embodying the same thing that you've railed against in the people you see as your enemies. You're adopting this victimhood state where now I have been aggrieved. This is a fundamentally egoistic, prideful posture where I've been aggrieved. The world owes me. And the Christian message is the world doesn't owe you anything. You owe the world, quote unquote, everything. You to embody Christ is to pour yourself out for the world. It's interesting that there's all kinds of complicated debates about proper Christian theology, and I'm not diminishing those. I think those have their place and they're great in it, and I'm forever indebted to the people who engage in them. But I think something that gets missed is people start having these really technical conversations about particular things regarding the nature of Christ, for example, or the nature of the Trinity. I've had some of these on this show, and I think those conversations have their place and they're great. But if those are the only thing that people are seeing, they're not seeing how this tangibly affects them. So if you have an improper understanding of the nature of Christ, you don't fully appreciate him being fully God and fully human. He is fully God and fully human. He didn't just take humanity as a skin to go, like your video game analogy. He didn't just take on the humanity skin so he could go beat the game and then take the skin off and go on and do something else. He is human for all of eternity.
Yeah, they make him a divine trickster.
Human.
Yeah, that's like a Gnostic divine trickster god.
And so then
that's what Islam. That's why Islam has they don't have a Trinitarian view of God, so they miss out and they create this caricature of Jesus where he pretended to die, or I don't know. I don't think he pretended. They thought he died, but he actually came off or something. They got him off the cross before he could die because only a loser would do that. Totally.
Exactly.
Point, you know.
This is great. 2-Bit Podcast. He said there's a wrestling with God podcast series that needs to happen, a pro wrestling / orthodoxy podcast series. That'd be very good. So when you have this view of Christ, that Christ is like 100% God, and then he put on a human skin so that he could go satisfy the wrath of God and kind of work this legal fiction to make us justified, even though we're not actually justified. It's just his justification imputed on us, but we're still the same thing. We're just like his, it's like his hand was there covering us up when the judgment was coming by. What happens from that then is that people's perspective on being Christian is, I'm 100% human and I need to put on the skin of God. I need to take it on as a skin so I can go play the video game and get to the end. So how do I take the skin of God? But that's not what theosis is. Theosis is not you taking on God's skin. St. Athanasius said that God became man so that man might become God. There is another world after this one. We're proceeding toward another world.
But it might look a lot like this one.
Yes, exactly. There's this notion that
not a cloud, probably.
What's that?
Probably not a cloud or something like that.
Right, right. Yeah, and there's probably not on the flip side, there's probably not like a big cavernous flaming hole with a bunch of little demons with pitchforks, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's the next world will be, we're progressing into that world. We've been living in the end times since the time of Christ. Yeah. We're in the end times. For 2,000 years, people have been in the end times. And I talked about coming from Seventh-day Adventism, where
it's like a joke, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like very
an end time that never ends. Goodness.
Yes. So Seventh-day Adventism is very eschatological. It's very obviously.
Did you say scatological?
No, eschatological.
They usually probably make their own compost for their human diet. Sorry to pick on them. I love them.
It's obviously it's in the name, the Advent. They're looking toward the Advent of Christ, and so then there's this. It's what drove me away. Really, is this complete arbitrary valuation of this life. That this life is a proving ground for the next life, but then you get this weird tension where this life doesn't matter. All that matters is the next one. So then we have to be really strictly legalistic and arbitrary about the specific checklist of duties that we're allowed to participate in this life. It's completely detached. There's this dualism again between this life and the next life. The reason I titled this episode "Building the City of God" is because you had this conversation. I think it was actually just a monologue about the cornerstone, what the cornerstone is. Mm-hmm. And I want to kind of draw out this analogy here of you said starting in a garden, ending in a city. Mm-hmm. And there's a very distinct Christian antipathy for technology, that technology is something to be avoided or something that is somehow
that's not
evil.
Christianity.
No, not at all. We're expected to use technology. So how does a Christian use technology to build the city of God? With the knowledge or understanding that this isn't some kind of a utopian, like our job is to exterminate all evil doing from the world, and then this world becomes the city of God. You know, it's like a kind of a Nietzschean, Ubermenchian sort of. We need to literally build a city here on this earth that is literally the throne of God. Like these things are both literally true and not literally true at the same time. Are you tracking with what I'm trying to unpack here?
Yeah, say it again just to help me focus in on it.
So
I was pulling up a Bible verse while you were talking, and I'm going to read it.
Okay. So you've got these a couple different ideas here. One of them is the story of the Bible begins in a garden and it ends in a city.
Right.
As Christians, our responsibility is to manifest the city of God in this world, in this life.
By making our lives living stones in the edifice of the structure. Yes.
Bingo. That's it. Yes.
That's right. That's what Peter talks about, the little rock, right? Look at this. I wanted to share this. I like this from Acts 1:10 through 11. I don't know what translation it is, but I found it real fast. It says, they were looking intently up into the sky as he was going, when suddenly 2 dudes dressed in white stood beside them. Men of Galilee, they said, why do you stand here looking into the sky? This same Jesus who has been taken from you into heaven will come back in the same way you have seen him go into heaven. They were up looking in the sky, disembodied from reality, right? Let's get to work, right? You see what I mean? I mean, you just see it in the text everywhere when you look. This whole idea of like why are you looking up in the sky for some Gnostic dualistic view of God? Which makes you wonder, I don't know, how does that actually look when he ascends? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
because if you think about it, the traditional understanding of him like floating up, and it's like, but that's not what he does. I don't know, man. It makes you wonder because it's like that's not typically how he does things. He doesn't do it in the tradition. That's kind of like here I come to save the day, and so it's almost like kind of a satire on that because they're all like looking up in the sky. Where in the world did he go? Is he back yet? They're up there looking up, and then some guys show up and they're like, "What are you doing?" Like he's coming back the same way he came in, which is through you. Your bodies. Get
Mm.
out there. Come on. He just said, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you can move mountains. Get on with it. Come on. Stop navel gazing,
Right.
because when you get into your mind psychologically, that's a kind of up in the sky again, right? You're too heavenly
Mm-hmm.
minded for any earthly good, which isn't heavenly minded at all because the kingdom of God, right, is coming into earth. It's in breaking through us as living stones, as you mentioned in history.
Right. We are. This is where I said it before. The church is the body of Christ. This isn't This isn't metaphorical language, or it's not strictly metaphorical language.
Yeah.
We are quite literally. We are His hands and feet. We are through Him embodying us. We are His body in this world. We are the way that He manifests in this world. It's interesting. This verse here being that the biblical authors when they wrote these texts. Now, Luke and Acts are much more scientific minded, sort of. They're more kind of like a more modern approach of like trying to strictly document the events exactly as they happened. Whereas other parts of the Bible are the way ancient people thought wasn't like, I need to have my notepad here where I'm going to sit down and jot down, Bob raised his left arm and then he took 3 steps forward, yada, yada. You touched on this. You can almost understand this in two senses where Jesus literally like up in the sky and they're standing here, necks craned back, looking up after him. Or it could be understood sort of metaphorically where, if you understand heaven and earth are not 2 different realms.
Yep.
It's one realm that you perceive in 2 different ways.
That's it.
So when he ascends into heaven, this is the way ancient people would talk about it. He ascends into the uncreated world that we can't naturally see. And they're looking up into heaven. So they're sitting there staring into the uncreated world, kind of like, all right, are you coming back? What's going on?
They're still holding on to the objectified version of him still.
Right,
They're
right.
slow to learn. And that's what's funny about the text. The Bible's so funny, and it's kind of satirizing your expectations of like divine power, right?
Right.
And that's why if you're always craving for a king or a Caesar, you're not letting the Bible read you. You know what I mean? You're still going off to this, looking to the sky for my hero to come save me. You know what I mean? Instead of like, no, man, that's not at all what this is about. And the Bible's right. It's mocking. It's kind of laughing at it a little bit. If you see it there, I mean, it's funny. Like in what other religion would that happen?
None.
Think about, we're so terrified to engage the text in some ways because we're afraid we're going to go off in the wrong direction and create a new cult. I get it. You know what I'm saying? But like, we're afraid to to let the text be playful because the text is filled with all kinds of puns and double entendres and all these different things. And we're afraid we want to make it really rarefied and very solemn and all this, but has those things, but it's very humorous and it's satirizing man's notion of the divine. Like you said, it's satire. I mean, what other religion would do that? Would be like, they're all looking up and they're like, and he's like, no, dude, what are you doing? Like, why do you got your head in the sky? Why do you got your
like the ostensible heroes of the story, so to speak? The way that
that's something Hercules would do, or something. Zeus,
right.
You would look into the sky for the thunderclap or something, right? That's not what we're going to do here.
So the response, like kind of the little voice that I always have in the back of my head as I'm contemplating these, I'm trying to get this new. In the Orthodox world, they talk about the phronema, which is kind of like maybe best translated like mindset or like sort of like spiritual / cognitive posture. And as I'm trying to take this on, I'm trying to strip myself of some of this old baggage or let some of this old baggage be stripped from me that I've brought to bear here. one of the thoughts that I keep hearing, it's kind of like the critic that's sitting out there from like barking in from the peanut gallery, is where do you draw the line between striving after, let me set this up a different way. If you begin to embody the activity of sacrifice in your life, if you begin sacrificing for your loved ones, for the people around you, what's very likely to happen is like what happened with Job, is you're gonna accumulate great wealth. You're gonna accumulate, whether it's specifically monetarily, or if it's a great number of people who respect you, and through that respect, you earn this responsibility that you now bear. And responsibility and power are kind of are like cousins. They're always together, and maybe they're like twins. Responsibility and power are like siblings that are always together. So there's a sense in which, by the more self-sacrificial you become, the more powerful you become. Being able to affect signs and wonders is a form of power. It's a form of it's an activity that's going to draw resources, affection, respect, all these sorts of things to you. So there's a sense in which we are called to strive after these types of things. Like gaining resources is not a bad thing. Accumulating resources to yourself is not a bad thing. Technologically innovating in a way that is going to make you wealthy is not inherently a bad thing. There's not, but yet it's also very true on the other side that technology is inherently corrupting, because, or not inherently corrupting, but it tends to have a corrosive effect, because if men don't work, then they wither away, like literally physically. You'll wither away if you don't work. Technology is a force multiplier that begins to minimize the amount of actual work you have to do in return by leveraging the effort that you put out. So how do you balance these two forces? So say you have this
should Jesus have swam the Sea of Galilee to catch fish? I mean, just, like, seriously. I mean, he had a technology and he got in a boat. I mean, was he complaining, oh my goodness, what's this going to do to my work commitment? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Think about how we overthink these things, Would he have driven a car if they had a car back then? I mean, if they had
exactly. Yes, absolutely. Right. He rode a donkey. Like he's using technology.
Yeah. Somebody had to use technology to figure out how to get that thing to stay still so you can get on it. You know what I mean?
A rope. Yeah.
I mean, is that profane? Is that missing the mark? Is that a sin to put a rope around a donkey's head or whatever to move it? I mean, there's a technology in making wine. He used some kind of technology to make wine, whatever he did with the water. What else is there? I mean, think about there's a kind of technology to the fishes and loaves. The gospel itself, as I've said, I call it the gospel technology. The gospel is a technology, okay, where you have the same mythic structure of scapegoat lynching, but told from a different camera perspective. So that's like an artistic technology. It's like the first time you have color versus black and white film, but much, much more staggeringly paradigm shifting than that, right? Where, okay, we're going to get the same purging experience that a community is going to write as a thing that the gods did, visiting upon them to remind them not to break too many taboos of difference. That's how they're going to misremember it, so as to not face reality with what's really going on. And the gospel texts, these are texts written down with language, right? This is a type of technology meant to help you see things in a different light. And then you have a responsibility with that to do good things by that and to love
iconography.
Yeah. Or
iconography is a technology. The Eucharist is a technology.
To build a hospital. Putting mud on someone's eyes is a kind of technology to let them see. I mean, these are all, why are we scared of technology? How in the world are you going to build a city if there's a garden and there's fruit trees and then there's a city with fruit trees and rivers? How are you going to get the city there if you're not using tools that are extensions of yourself?
And this is what it means to exercise dominion. That was the command.
Pagans are
that man was
terrified of the
given.
forest. Remember that movie? What was that movie that came out? What was that movie that came out? By the guy that did Hereditary or whatever. It was the movie about the Midsummer. Remember that movie? The horror movie?
I didn't see it, but I
With
was
the
aware.
Swedish
But
little cult
I
and the
can't watch stuff
troopers
like
and all
that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were terrified of the forest, and they got mad at him because one of them chopped down a tree or something. You don't do that. Pagans are terrified of nature. Christians are not terrified of nature. But the problem is, it's obviously easy to point out the mistakes and the errors in that, because we got Christianity destroyed and demythologized nature so much that we've got goofballs like Fauci mixing, chimeric, bat stuff with human stuff, right? And putting human scalps on the backs of beagles' butts. Holy shnikes. I mean, so there's an extreme lack of fear and reverence for nature that's been unleashed because of the biblical text impacting the Western mind, such that nature is we're so not afraid of it in that way that we're willing to do these horrible merging of things to the point where it creates hell on earth. I mean, so there's a balance, right? I mean, obviously you have to have respect for boundaries, right? And trying to make, like you said, pig hearts. How's that going to work for our kosher Jewish Christians? My goodness. You know what I mean? Lord have mercy. I mean, can you imagine that? What is the dilemma in that? You're not allowed to eat pork. You had a heart attack. Doctor wakes you up and you got a pig heart. My God, am I going to heaven or not? I'm not allowed to eat it. I'm stuck with a pig heart to live. Doc, you got anything better for me? Couldn't you tell me to stop eating the seed oils, doctor?
Right.
Lord.
Well,
that's all.
One thing that I don't remember if it was.
What's that guy's pig name from Looney Tunes?
Oh, Porky Pig.
Porky Pig, yeah. We could
turn
into Porky Pig. All I
I
need
don't remember.
Tell me to stop eating seed oils.
I don't remember if I heard it from you or if I heard it from someone else, but they said that that taking up your cross is like we have this another one of these things that's almost become meaningless because we've heard it so many times. That to take up your cross, people kind of interpret this as like the Jordan Peterson sort of interpretation of it is kind of like find the heaviest thing that you can lift. It's like it's taken as like a burden. This is your life burden that you get to carry. Well, that the heaviest thing that you can lift
sounds
is
like a Yo Mama joke, doesn't it?
The heaviest thing that you can lift is the burden of the weight of the impending knowledge of your own death. To take up your cross is to embrace your own death, because who carried a cross? The guy who was carrying the cross to the place where it was going to be mounted on a hill, and he was going to be nailed to it and die. That's what it is to take up your cross. To take up your cross is to embrace your own death, to lose yourself, to lose sight of yourself. Not this individualism, like the self is the center of all things, and all that's real is me, and everything else is fake, or I can't even know if anything else is real. No, the only thing that you can know is that you are fake, that you are hollow, you are empty, and you must be diminished. You have to empty yourself rather than clinging to this pride. You let go of the pride, you nail it to the cross, and you embrace your own death. If you've embraced your own death, you're not going to do something like get a pig heart installed in you because you just want to squeeze out another 8 years of meaningless existence. You're going to accept your death. Now is my time.
I don't know. It's a wrestling with that, because I know what you mean, and I think you're right. But I think we have to be careful with the word embracing death, because death is an enemy to be defeated. I mean, it's swallowed up in hell. At the end, death is thrown into the lake of fire too.
Yeah, it's not embracing death.
Satan
It's embracing
is the accuser. Death is this other stronghold that's part of the complex of our problems, right? So we don't want to hug death. We want to throw that son of a gun into the fire, right?
Right.
Throw that son of a gun in the fire. But the way in which we do it, you trample out death by death.
Right. You embrace the awareness of that. You're not hiding from that. You're recognizing and you're accepting that you're going to die.
It's looking at death and realizing that it's not the final word and that it's been defeated, and therefore you're going to live forever. So start acting like it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Right. There are two deaths. There's physical death and there's spiritual death. We are going to physically die, but
but we're going to
That's
live
not the
forever.
real death, but we're
Yeah,
going to
we're going
live
to have
forever.
our body right now is a seed, and it's going to plant even more fully, completely incarnated um, oneness with God, and it will be material, right? And that's the thing, is like we're not going to a disembodied earth that's going to be floaty. It's going to be physical. We might have Mount Everest still here. We might be climbing it. We might be able to go find out those other planets and whatever else is going on out there, find Aslan, whoever that guy is, we might be able to do a lot of things we weren't expecting. But I think death anxiety is where you become owned by death. That's what Peter was driven by, right? That's why he slashes the ear, right? Because he's facing his mimetic double, the servant of the high priest, and therefore he's not hearing. He doesn't have faith. Faith comes by hearing. He can't hear what Jesus has told him, that we're not doing force and coercion to get the kingdom of God to come. And so by trying to strive to the point of death to protect Jesus from death, you're still owned by death. You're mimetically still owned by death, right? And that's kind of like what we talk about with mimesis, where it's like you can do the mere opposite and still be governed by the principle of sovereignty over you, right? And so if you're don't kill him, well, you're still owned by death. You're afraid of it. You're fearful of it, and therefore you're staying in the boat. You're staying in the boat. Peter had the opportunity. He could have broken. He could have disrupted potentially the mimetic spell of the crowd trying to kill Jesus. He could have faced the threat of death and social exclusion. Remember that girl was like, dude, you have a hick accent. I know you're one of his friends. You're one of his redneck friends. And he's like, no, that's not me, man. I don't talk like that. I don't know that guy. Right? That's the same. That was the mirror. It's the same thing as what he did when he slices the guy's ear, right? And the one, he's struggling against death in a sense of like in the mere opposite. I want life and I'll kill to get it. Right. And then in the next moment, he's like, I want life and I'll sell out his life to get it. He's still owned by the fear of death, and social exclusion is a kind of like a down payment, again, if you want to use that word, on physical death, because to be socially alienated is to be in a living death, right? Just ask people in solitary confinement right now what that's like, right? That's hell on earth. It's what Jesus experienced, right, on the cross. Peter didn't want to experience that. He was melted over a girl. A girl called him out. He's like, I don't have that country accent. That's not me.
There's a truth in there that really just stood out to me, that you talked about this tendency to otherize, to point the finger at it's his fault. It's all these people, nobody else is as good a Christian as I am. If everyone else is as good of a Christian as I am, then all these problems wouldn't be problems. When in reality, the presence of death in the world, the rise of the spirit of Antichrist, the presence of evil in the world is no, God didn't bring evil into the world. Man brought evil into the world. And the presence of evil and the advance of the spirit of Antichrist is a judgment on the church. It's the weakness of the church, that the church is allowing this. And God is allowing the church to allow this because he is through Christ, he's permanently wedded to us. He's permanently married to us, but he's respecting our will. And our will, if our will is going to lead into destruction, then he's going to allow that to happen. But he's also going to set the path for us that we can take to bring ourselves and bring our loved ones back from destruction. And you mentioned earlier how this deistic, you said, what is it? You said that theology is biology, that this deistic biography, that this part of the reason why deism became so fashionable is, and the same reason why communism is always like it's always an ideology of the aristocrats, who are all these wealthy people who distinctly recognize their own insufficiency, that they don't deserve all of this wealth. So they have to jigger some kind of an ideology that says, actually, no, we're actually the smartest and the most brilliant, and everyone else, if they were like us, then all would be well. The deism was born out of, in the lives of these individual men, absentee fathers. And today there's this crisis of fatherhood. There's this crisis of masculinity that people talk about. There's toxic masculinity, all these other different things. But in the same way that the church betraying its own responsibilities allows for the spread of evil and death, men betraying their responsibilities allows for the spread of what's perceived as the errors of women. But women follow men. This is a natural biological reality.
Mhm.
If the women are degenerating collectively, it's because the men have degenerated collectively. If the men are bearing their responsibility, if the men are carrying their crosses, if they're nailing themselves to the cross, then the women are going to follow. The women are going to be drawn to them and they're going to follow with them. So when we talk about these deficits in Peter Thiel's his comment about us stagnating in the realm of atoms and advancing so far in the realm of bits, I think there's a really interesting masculine feminine element at work there, where you think about when the stagnation really began, like the 60s, the 70s. This is right about the same time that the distinct feminization of men began as well. And if we're going to not go back, but move forward into an age in this third millennium where the church takes the forefront again of science and innovation and technology and healing diseases, exploring the world, understanding the world around us, understanding the garden that we've been placed in, and then building this city of God, it's going to start with men. It's going to have to start with men. So what does it mean then? Use the analogy of the cornerstone, becoming the cornerstone. How is Christ the cornerstone? And then how do men embody Christ in becoming the stones that form the walls of the city of God?
Yeah, that's a good question. I want to put out something I've thought about on that issue of feminine and masculine. I think that this is something I've thought about and played with, and I'll share it with you. I think that Earth is kind of like feminine, right?
Mother
And
Earth.
so, yeah, in the sense of like an archetypal kind of a feminine, God incarnates Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have this kind of running theory in my head in terms, and I'm always talking about different radical technologies that people think, what's that? I never heard of that. And I look at these things. I like studying strange, oddball people doing weird physics experiments and things like that. And I have noticed a pattern that it seems as if we have become overly masculine in the way in roughhousing Earth and the way we explore our technologies. And watch this, and it corresponds with a kind of feminine, emasculated society. So we got to get that in balance again. So if we learn to romance nature, this is a good one. I get excited because this is crazy stuff. That's the fun stuff. If we learn to romance nature and the way we produce energy, and be delicate and feminine and graceful, and be more feminine in the way we approach and harness nature, it reorders back to a masculine social order where there's boundaries and differentiation respected without violence. And so what that means is, if you're so fixated on the combustion engine that you haven't thought about magnetic fields, gently creating low temperature nuclear energy without blowing things up, you could just use magnetic fields that are in nature to create. And I'm not going to do it justice. I'll let Dr. Yu explain it. Then maybe we need to move away from blow things up to get energy. And the same thing with, now there's a stupid way of doing that too, by the way, where you're so romantic to nature that you're impotent in the energy you produce, like wind farms and solar panels. Okay. That's too romantic. Because you're not able to take care of society. We need to have, reliable energy that's affordable, and not. And so obviously you can't go that way. That's the dumb, fake green energy. See how we take back the terms, by the way?
Uh-huh.
I hate these stupid conservative people. The green energy. No, it's fake green energy. It's fake. Just like fake, news or whatever.
Fake mainstream media, yeah.
The same thing with, I keep talking about elemental transmutation. And people think, what the heck are you talking about, right? But I mean, I've literally investigated this, and you can go back and look at Science and New episodes, and you'll see that we've hinted about what we've looked at. But there's this evidence that you can take microwave fields, which are a type of magnetic field, and you can use relatively lower temperatures to actually gently cajole one element into another element. Now, you're not supposed to, oh my goodness, scary demons are coming out. Oh my goodness. Oh, no. That's pagan. Sorry, we're not thinking like pagans. But if we can eat trash and find rare earth elements, our electronics, or to provide, things that we need, then we don't have to violently penetrate the earth with these mining things that end up exploiting labor and creating wars. Like, why do we want North Korea $6 trillion worth of untapped rare earths in there? And China's got access to things that we want and all these things. So that puts all this tension and puts all this violence and conflict and sacrificial bloodshed on the table, where you can heal that by having a more gentle, feminine, graceful approach to nature. Low temperature, gentle, and all of a sudden we're moving one element to another, right? And guess what? When we have rare earth elements that are abundant from trash, now we can alleviate that ridiculousness of having a overbearing motherly prison system to regulate everything and to incarcerate us and to regulate and control and give us 3 square meals inside of the belly of the prison, which is, by the way, don't ever let any of these little tough guy, little Caesars tell you that they're tough on crime because they want to send people to prison forever. That's a very overbearing mother approach. You know what I'm saying? Like, think about that.
Yeah.
And then they say, oh, I want tougher than that. Okay. You go ahead. You be the first to bring back crucifixions, buddy, big tough guy. They don't want to do it. They're just, it's LARPing. It's trying to be tough. They're desperate. They need help. They want to feel like I don't mean help in the middle. They need help in terms of they want solutions and they're desperate for answers. And it's hard to kick against the pricks. But you see what I mean? Like, anti-gravity. Why do we have to have cars that have to have tires and all this friction on the road? Why can't we have anti-gravity? Why can't we realize that gravity is not just an attractive force, but it also has a repulsion to it? And if that's the case, then how do we gently use that? And how do we think about that? It might be right under our noses, right? You see what I mean? So that's incarnating feminine, treating Earth in a feminine way. And then that somehow opens up radical decentralization so that men, the way, governments can be, men tend to be more liberty oriented instead of like trying to create a big, giant, overbearing, controlling nanny state. Right. And it balances out. Isn't that neat? It's pretty cool. I mean, I think it's pretty cool. Now, did I go off on too much of a different topic?
No, this is perfect. Cause I was, so Adams, thinking about atoms versus bits. So if you think about these kind of stereotypically, women have often been associated with healing. There's this like nursing. Nurses is overwhelmingly represented with women because there's this the natural motherly nurturing instinct that's associated with healing. When a man is sick, like he just wants to lay his head in his wife's lap and just have her rub his back, and like you get the man cold where he just kind of turns into a great big baby, and you want that nurturing motherly instinct. So there's a natural, in the world of atoms, you get this natural feminine, the feminine spirit is naturally drawn to it. Whereas men tend to be a lot more rational and I'm saying that almost as a pejorative. Men tend to be much more the realm of bits. Like if you think about computer engineers and software programmers and all this sort of thing, like that's the domain of men. Men are the ones overwhelmingly represented there because that more kind of trapped in your head, heady intellectual thing, that's much more masculine. The problem is when you have when men stop being men, women start being men. And if women start being men, now you get poor women and poor men because women make poor men. If the women start becoming men, then the men have to start becoming the women because there's these kind of oppositional forces where one will breed the other. So it's no wonder that our gender roles are all thrown in the air because it began with men no longer being responsible, capable, Christ-like men. The loss of, I think that you can draw a connection here.
This can be explained anthropologically because competition breeds undifferentiation.
Yes.
And that's why ancient societies had strict prohibitions and taboos to keep their hierarchies in place because they the only resolution they had, if you had runaway competition, was a type of sacrificial controlled act of violence, right? And they didn't want to let that get out of control because then it'd be violence all the time. So it's like, okay, this is our one special trick that our ancestors taught us when they were visited by the gods. And so we know to employ it instinctively. Somebody needs to be blamed, and you don't, it's not even like you rationally think it. It's just a feeling, it's a group feeling. And you're like, we do this, and then it becomes sacrifice. So there's lynchings, and then there's sacrificial reenactments of lynchings, and that both can take place, and both can provide catharsis in a ancient civilization or ancient tribal community. And that was a means of creating and staving off radical, out of control mimetic undifferentiation. And so what Jesus does is he takes the bumpers of our bowling game away, and now we got to learn to strike, or else we're going to fall into the gutter of history. And so our civilization is at a test now. It's been tested, and the question is, are we going to be found wanting or not? Are we going to learn to bowl and strike like an adult, or are we so dependent on sacrificial violence, which is being completely destroyed rapidly because technology is one of those is a type of Christian technology that allows humanity to see itself in more and more grotesque ways. And the more you see yourself in more and more grotesque ways, the more you're repulsed, and then you try to double down with another narrative, flimsy as it can be, to create that kind of transcendence and otherize somebody else. But it keeps failing, and it keeps failing, and it creates schism after schism after schism. And the only way to stop this is to stop relying on sacred violence, and to stop deifying your neighbor, right? Your neighbor is made in the image of God, and you desire to be with God. You are made in the image of a Trinity, which means relation is part of your being. Yes. Which means you're always, if you're not careful, going to have a tendency to deify the other. That's what I'm explaining the theology of mimesis right now, right? You deify the other. My career is not going right, but theirs is. Something's not right. I'm not getting my just desserts or whatever in life. Something's holding me back. It's my race. It's my whatever, my childhood traumas, whatever it is holding me back. It's unfair, but that person seems to have a much more unfair blessing, and they get to coast in life. I have to do this much amount of work, and they have to do this much amount of work, and they get to have all that, and I get to have all this little bit. It's not fair, right? That's deifying the neighbor. But it's a twisted desire of something in which you really want to have transcendence by relationship with the other, which is the Trinity. So when you misplace that into worship of the creation rather than worship of the creator, then you get into this kind of mimetic repulsion and attraction, which is what we call mimetic rivalry. And again, what Christianity does is that it starts to show how some forms of hierarchy and some types of differentiation are violent and unfair, right? And what the left does, what wokeism and that's just the latest fundamentalist version of what was political correctness before that and something else before that. The left is basically saying, well, differentiation itself is violent because it can be the occasion for scapegoating, right? So when you are in a primordial sense, everybody's stressed out. I'm talking, it's ancient society times. We haven't had rain in a long time. You're getting stressed, and I'm getting stressed, and you and I are starting to have friction. We used to get along. Now we're having problems. And it's much easier for us to point at the little dwarf who's 3 foot tall and say, that guy, why is he so abnormally small? It may be the gods hate him, and he's brought that curse into our community. And so, because might makes right, that kind of framework is implicit in that kind of pagan way. You say, get rid of that guy. That guy brought in the wrath of the gods, and you put him on a pole or whatever, and you throw him off of a cliff. That's horrible, but that's what people do. And that visceral reality of watching someone die and killing them with your neighbor that you and I hated each other, and now we get along. That's such a rapid emotional, spiritual transition. Boom. Such a relief that it gives you the sense of shared transcendence, which is a false form of the shared transcendence of Trinitarian relationality. Does that make sense? That's the Satan. That's the Satan. That's why Jesus said, behold, I see Satan fall like lightning, because that framework was considered to be divine, and then God destroyed it. and it fell like lightning to the earth. And now we know it as the accuser. Now we know it as the false religion that we're all tempted by to this day. We do this in every type of way you can imagine. We do it, you go to a high school reunion and everybody's kind of shy and whatever, and you break the ice because you remember stories that are making fun of a friend that, everybody laughed at. That's a proto scapegoating catharsis. You're building rapport by, kind of at the expense of somebody else, right? The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. But in so doing, right, what happens is now the revenge of the nerds is taking place, right? Now the people who are the butt of the jokes are now taking over the world, right? But they will too create more blowback in the form of these little guys that get on there with Bronze Age prayer. Now we're the victims because we work out. They're gonna try to do the same stupid cycle, eternal return stupidity, totally owned by the crowd, totally owned by the fake sacred, totally religious, totally missing the boat. You know what I mean?
If you think about what is masculinity and what is femininity, masculinity is that which gives, and femininity is that which receives. There's an old joke about how a woman will take whatever you give her and give it back to you like tenfold. So if you give her seed, she'll give you a child. If you give her a house, she'll make it a home. And if you give her bullshit, then she's going to give you a mountain of crap back. But that it's getting at that idea that the masculine perspective is that which gives, that which pours out. Christ, we are the bride of the church. We are the bride of Christ. With respect to Christ, the church is feminine because we receive from him. He gives to us.
Yeah.
But then with
like
respect
Mary,
to the
right,
world,
is the womb, right, for incarnation to take place.
Right.
And earth. These are,
Right.
I mean, archetypes have some
Yes.
play here. I mean, I like to focus more on, the anthropology, but archetypes have there's a lot of truth to it, using those patterns,
Right.
like
'Cause then
even
with
somebody told
respect-
me about like Little Mermaid. I mean, I haven't seen that new movie or whatever, but the idea of the earth, the ocean being like the belly of the earth, right? It's at the bottom of the earth, and that's like that's where mermaid, that's feminine, and then the guy on the ship, he's from the land, that's the mind, that's heaven and earth coming together, right? And that like and bringing legs is like incarnational reality happening where you're the technology, boats, right? You know what I mean?
Right.
Nature being brought into the city, right?
Right.
Nature to
Right.
garden to city. Earth.
So the church is the with respect to humanity, to the rest of the world, the church is masculine because the church is giving to the world. You give to the world, whether you're giving in the like donational like charity sense,
Right.
or whether you're giving of yourself. You're sacrificing yourself for the world. And I think it's not a coincidence then in that model that the church is constructed visibly as a hierarchy of men, because the church has the masculine role with respect to the rest of the world. The way that these
but in relationship to God, it's feminine. Yeah.
Right. So we receive from God, we give to the world. And then so you have the feminine garden at the beginning and the masculine city at the
Within
end.
the garden. Yeah.
Within the garden. Right.
Rivers.
Right.
Fruits for healing of the nation.
Right.
What does it mean to have healing of the nations? I mean, it would start with getting rid of seed oils. I mean, come on. See, I believe that like, I take that when it says, for God so loved the world, right? I believe that Jesus is saving the world. I don't have a defeatist mindset. I think.
Are you familiar with the recapitulation theory of atonement?
I mean, I've heard of it. What is it in your?
Most simply, it's essentially that
is it Athanasius or what is that?
Athanasius, and I think the first person who was it Irenaeus, I think, was one of the first people to really he might have been the first one to use the term. I think it was Irenaeus. Someone in the comments is gonna yell at me for not getting it right. But the notion essentially is that God saves the world by saving humanity. That humanity is that the world fell with humanity because our role metaphysically interfaced with creation is such that when man falls, the rest of creation falls with him.
Right.
And that Christ, in saving man, has recapitulated and is saving through creation through man. And that this is what it meant for man to exercise dominion over the earth. Adam's first responsibility was to name the animals. And that's not just like he's saying, all right, we're going to call you zebra, we're going to call you lion, we're just making up some mouth sounds. A name is an identity. A name is like the thing that defines you. So Adam's job was to put creation in order, to justify creation, to give you meaning and purpose, to align you together, to order creation.
And every animal and every gemstone has a meaning, it has revelation about what God is like.
Yes.
They're all designed as images of little partial reflections of like God's character and personality. That's why he says, study the ants and behemoth and all these different things,
in the sense that Jesus is both God and man together. So you have humanity, and then humanity is mixed with God. In the same way, how is man created? He spoke the animals into existence, but with man, he took existing creation, fashioned it, and then breathed into it. So man was from the beginning, man was inextricably bound up with creation. He was made out of the existing creative material. And then the spirit, the life, was put into him by God. So there's this same kind of a similar model here where you have, I don't want to speak of these things too strictly or too literally, but where you have God becoming merged with humanity and humanity being merged with creation. So that then God saving man is saving creation. Yeah. Man falling away from God is creation falling away.
Right. That's why creation is groaning, right? In the New Testament.
Right.
In birth pains, right? For the new world order of Jesus Christ, right? And people who study midwifery or whatever, they talk about, like you can have pain-free birth when you learn to not try to control the process, but go through it, in a kind of natural cycle way of the body that's very feminine and very mysterious and very earthy in a way that, trying to control it through medicalization and all that just totally makes it much more harder and difficult and more health risking too, right? And that's the problem, right? Faith, the opposite of faith is control, trying to control the process rather than trusting, right? And so when you don't trust in the goodness of your creator, if you don't trust in the concept that death has been defeated, if you don't trust that Jesus has given you authority, right? And that you are to perform signs and wonders, if you don't trust all that, you're going to try to control it through left brain dominated kind of control mechanisms. And it's going to create backfiring after backfiring, schism after schism, and more conflict and hell on earth, which is what we see in the headlines today in our life. But, the good news is that things are going to go in the direction that Christ wants it to be. Christ is sovereign and Christ is saving the world. And we shouldn't be afraid of that vocation,
Well, we're coming up here on, I know you've got a heart out here, and having this conversation. And I think there's many directions that this conversation can go. We've spent a lot of time speaking in kind of in metaphors or we've been a little kind of detached from the earth a little bit here. So like as we come back down, as we land the plane here, what are some tangible things that you're working on that you would encourage other people to either support or do their own version of, that are actual, like, literal tangible steps that they can take forward if they're feeling compelled by this worldview and they want to start embodying this in their own life? How can they go forward?
Embodying what in their own life?
The spirit that we're talking about, the spirit of Christianity innovating and building the city of God in the world today.
Well, the Holy Spirit means defense attorney. Paraclete means defender, right? Defender of victims. So don't be afraid to go and stand in defense of victims, and show the world how to do it right. Right? Don't be afraid to wash the feet of those who you think have lesser status than you. Like whatever you believe, you don't be status obsessed. wash the feet of those who you want to emulate you, because then you'll create a positive mimetic reciprocity by which people are one-upping each other in their humility, in their posture of service to one another. I mean, that's the basic thing, is just watch the impacts of the world digging into you without you being aware of it. You know, be aware of the fact that mimetic desire is driving so many of the things that you are so desirous of, wealth or asceticism or whatever it is. Be aware of that. Be aware of the folks in your life, through your life, that have been modeling desires that you have you've been unconsciously or consciously modeling and not finding satisfaction. The more you try to draw closer to the object that they are modeling for you, the more you realize how unsatisfying it is, and how many warts you see on it, you know, when you're up close. And so just being liberated being liberated from individualism is the only way to become a true person, right?
Oh, that's a bar.
That's something that folks who are libertarian inclined would do well to understand. At the same time, for those on the right who are always looking for some Caesar, like, no. Just because we're critiquing individualism doesn't mean we go into the other stupid thing of, you know, begging for a little Caesar and looking to the sky for some macho to save you. Like, that's lame, and it's not true. It's a lie, and it's a lie from hell. And hell is where we're ending up in, and if we don't stop doing that, right? Okay, because hell, Gehenna, is the destruction of the American temple in our life in a way that will be very brutal and violent and horrible and ongoing, you know. And so you're going to reap what you sow. If you keep trusting in false gods and false messiahs to save you, you're going to keep sowing, and you're going to reap that same whirlwind of destruction, and you're going to end up in the fires of Gehenna. And if you keep using Jesus as an object to get you a special boy status so you can go and debate other people online and tweet against your opponents, then again, you're playing around like a child. You need to grow up. The Bible's about growing up. Just like it goes from a garden to a city, the Bible's about becoming an adult, about growing up. That's what Paul talks about. Milk is, you know, that's law. And then you get into wisdom, right? And that's where you're growing up. Now you're learning how to embrace the paradox of things, right? How can you be embracing personhood, David, but also rejecting individualism? Well, Christianity helps you see how to do that, right? I mean, nonviolence is the glue that shall bind us together. We're either going to be bound by creative violence or creative nonviolence. The first stone, right? All the stones are going to go throw it at this woman. That's creative violence. There's a problem, adultery, right? And the problem is, if that's left unchecked, then it's going to spread like wildfire and pollute and destroy the community with undifferentiation. So what do we do? Because undifferentiation means who's married to who. It's all chaos at that point if you let this woman go unpunished. Right? That's the thinking, right-wing thinking. And throw stones, and that will be creative violence. Because what's the solution? Well, we killed her. We stopped it. We made a deterrence. That was the creative act. It was violent, right? And Jesus puts the emphasis on the first stone, because the first stone is the hardest thing to be. The person who throws without a model. The person who initiates creative violence without a model. The person who puts in the first nail without the model. Into the hand of somebody else, right? The person who castigates on Twitter before there was a model. It's always that first stone, which is the hardest thing to do, which initiates a mimetic contagion either for God or for Satan. So when you do the first stone, that's the hardest emphasis. That's why Jesus puts emphasis on that. That's how he's social Aikido destroying the hive mind that's possessing them. He says, who's going to cast the first stone? Now he's breaking their groupthink. He's breaking their collectivism. He's getting them to think, okay, who is it going to be? Is it going to be me or Bob? Because I know Bob's a bit of a hellion. And I know, Timmy, I know what you do. Yeah, I don't know. And now your emphasis is that the personal responsibility of the stone. When you're throwing in a crowd, you don't even know if you're stoned. If they're all throwing at the same time, even hit the woman. It could have hit the ground next to her. Who knows? That ain't killing. That's right. That's why the ancient killings always do collective herd things. Like, remember when they're trying to throw him off the cliff, they'll start walking towards him so that he falls off the cliff and he like vanishes right out of the way. And so that way nobody I didn't kill him. You didn't kill him. We just kept walking and he fell off the cliff. So there's always this like lack of like personal agency involved in these kind of collective murders. So Jesus is bringing that to awareness. And so then what happens is Jesus gets them to account for what they're doing. And then he gets them to do, wait a second, let's have the first stone of nonviolence. And so the laying of the stone down, it says the elders threw the stone down first. So they were the ones who were more prestigious in the crowd. And so others looked at them and imitated them and said, hey, that's what a man does. He lets go of the stone instead of murdering this woman because he's got sin in his own heart too. So then that creates a mimetic contagion of nonviolence, creative nonviolence. What's the creativity happening in that act of mimetic nonviolence? Repentance, right? Because now she's got this ecstatic moment. She was about to be killed. She was ashamed. Now she's been saved by grace. And guess what? Now she wants to repent without having any violence done to her. And Jesus comes to her and says, go and sin no more. You're free. You know? Now the left wants to kill Jesus because, you know, he said, go and sin no more. He still maintained differentiation without the threat of violence. And the right wants to kill Jesus because he didn't go along with killing the woman who was impure, who was creating a contagion of shame. And that, you see those people on the right all the time online talking about, oh, no. We got to get tough. No more turn of the cheek stuff. No. You haven't even tried it. You haven't even tried it. And so how does a nation, this is why I want to ask these little right wing, I like picking on them because, you know, they like to act like they're tough. I want to ask you guys, little Caesars out there, how in the world can you say you're tough because, oh, I'm a Christian nationalist, but you want to go ahead and say, oh, we don't have time for turning of the cheek. We got to have a Caesar. Our nation hasn't even begun to repent. We haven't even tried it. You have so many wars, so many lies, false flags, surveillance, destruction of the family. How many rapes go on every day? You send a boy into a prison for a small sentence, he comes out, you know, sodomized 1,000 times. What the hell does that do to his spirit? He brings that hell back to home. And you think you're a tough guy because you did that? You think you're a Christian because you did that? You're not a tough guy. And you're not no little Christian. You're not building a Christian nation. You're building a nation of shame, a body of death. So how about we try repentance for once and actually try it and actually live it out incarnationally instead of saying, oh, I'm going to follow Jesus' nonviolence, but that's a suffering servant little trick he did, and I'm going to go send my neighbor to a rape cage because he got high. How about you actually try to think through the social ordering principle of nonviolence as Jesus creatively demonstrates it in every aspect of his life? Try it before you go and say, we don't have time for turning of the cheek. Just try it and see what you can do, because that's creative nonviolence. And that's actually how we heal the nations and baptize the nations.
Instead of, how would you say this? So there's scientism, which is not, you had science and then you have scientism, and then you have Christianity, and then you have like Christianism, where it kind of gets at that Christianian thing that I was saying at the beginning, where rather than Christ being at the heart of it, it's this vague sense of what is like the aesthetic of Christianity that's being worshipped versus Christ himself.
Right. Yeah, it's like a talisman. It's like an ancient talisman they found, and they keep it and they lug it around whenever they're traveling. You know, they put it in the back of their car. This is a secret talisman. It's called Christianity. Ooh, I got it. You don't have it. It's like, okay, buddy, go ahead, pagan. You're still acting like a pagan, man. Come on. We have to grow up, man. You know, that's child's play. When I was a child, I spake as a child. When I became a man, I put away childish things. It's time to grow up. Stop putting your little isms together and stop trying to come up with a new little niche. You know, repent. And not repent in the same of like, oh, I'm such a loser. No, just stop doing what you're doing. Stop voting for false gods. Stop justifying it. Stop having an envious, resentful heart. Stop begging for violence against your enemy. Go wash the feet of some transgender person. Go wash the feet and make sure no one's looking, because then you're doing it for the right reason. Try that before you go and say, oh, we've tried the turning of the cheek thing. Now we got to get a Caesar. You haven't tried nothing. You've been trying false flags and patriot acts and war on drugs and war on education and war on poverty and all this garbage. Those are just like collective manifestations of the spirit of the persons that are going along with this nonsense, idolizing welfare and warfare and all this stuff. So you thought I was going to roast on a libertarian. Now I sound like I'm friends with him again, right? Because it's a balance, man. It's not about the ideology of individualism. Who said you have to buy into that nonsense that we're islands unto ourselves to love your neighbor and not want to put him in a rape cage for a nonviolent sin, right? Like, you don't have to buy into this dumb ideology of rationalism to know what's true in your heart from the conscience that God's given you. And the Holy Spirit, there's a reason he gave us the Holy Spirit. That's our defense attorney. And that's what we appeal to when we're dealing with the accuser. That's what we stand in solidarity with the woman accused of adultery. Stop it. We're still going to see, it's maintaining differentiation with nonviolent love. That's the secret. It's not that hard. The left wants to take away differentiation because they're afraid it might get the girl killed, right? If we say that adultery is wrong, it might get her killed, and that's not fair. And so they're pointing out a part of the gospel. So you just got to harmonize the left and the right parts, and then you get the full picture back in place together. See what I mean? Mm-hmm. Left says don't give any differentiation because that might get that girl killed. And they're speaking about a Holy Spirit truth that's partially true, deeply true. And that's why they're more effective at moving culture than the right is. And then the right says, but we can't allow this to be said to be just as good as marital fidelity. I mean, come on. If we do that, we'll be destroyed. We'll be totally disintegrated. It'll be a poisonous mimetic contagion. So the answer in the Christian way is no, we maintain differences. Fidelity is good, right? Adultery is bad. But we're not going to murder and sacrificially lynch people in order to maintain that difference. We're going to learn how to be adults.
That was fantastic. That was it. I could keep you here for hours longer. We could talk about Ray Pete. We could talk about ancient history that's been untold. We could talk about cycles of catastrophes. We could talk about elemental transmutation and other forms of cheap energy. Maybe in the future we'll have a conversation like that. For now, do you have any plugs? Anywhere you want to send people?
Sure. I mean, go to our website and neighborschoice.com with the neighborschoice.com. And our podcast is just search for my name, David Gornoski, as it's spelled on the screen here, at whatever podcast you like. Contribute to the show if you like what we're doing. We're not sponsored by Pfizer. And, have fun.
Awesome. Sounds good. I've got some super chats here that I'm going to read through. You're welcome to stick around as long or as little as you want. Sure. I want to recognize the super chats that I got. So I appreciate you, David. This has been a lot of fun, and we should do this again. Let me scroll up here and hit some of these. Okay. So 2-Bit Podcast, who I think you've talked with him before, with Jason and Mark. This is Jason. He sent $20 Australian. What is it called? Rue bucks. This is a term for Australian dollars. They're rue bucks. Adam became aware of his nakedness after the fall. We became aware of our spiritual poverty after the cross. And then another one down here. Got $5 from random username. Appreciate you, buddy. And then another $20 of or another 20 rue bucks here from Jason. He said, our collective awareness of the desire for the transcendent will be the revelation of this age. Jason and I last night had in the Discord, the supporting listeners Discord for King Pilled, we had a very interesting conversation related to this, talking about competency and our role in embracing this responsibility for innovating, for healing, for saving people, for saving the world, and that competency is going to be at the core of that, because the current situation with you've got the stakeholder capitalism with Klaus Schwab, and
you just a cheap ripoff of Jesus, man. We don't need to worry.
Right?
About it.
Yeah, exactly.
The cheap wannabe.
And corruption is what is enshrined at the center of it. Yeah. So the project is doomed to fail. But see, the thing with stakeholder capitalism is that, and I don't want to keep you. So at any point here, if you want to peace out, then feel free to.
No, I was going to do what we do. You know, you got in the South, you got to pass that bucket right again to get some more, some tithes.
Right.
Get some more before we can pay the rent for this building. Come on, pass the chicken bucket again. Come on, get some more donations in from our brother here. Come
on. So the thing with stakeholder capitalism is that it's not wrong. This notion that companies, if a company is to exist, they don't just have a duty to their shareholders. If that's a contractual relationship they've entered in, sure, fair enough, whatever. But a proper company does owe a duty to its stakeholders. It does owe a duty to its community. It does owe a duty to its employees. It does owe a duty to its vendors. Stakeholder capitalism is true, but at the heart of it is incompetence and corruption, because it's not an incarnational philosophy. It has no vitality. It has no life. It's dead. But if you build a Christian company, an explicitly Christian company, where you sacrifice yourself into that, where you're solving problems for other people, you're making other people's lives easier, you're taking away pain and suffering, you're healing people, you're performing signs and wonders through technological innovation and development to make housing cheaper, to make energy cheaper, to improve this food supply, to generate additional livable land,
architecture more beautiful.
Yes, all of these
agriculture, like our buddy Joel Salatin.
Yes, this is the frontier.
Anti-gravity. I mean, what we need, Christians need to be flying into their next TED Talks at that Davos meeting with anti-gravity hoverboards, get on stage and wash that stinking Klaus Schwab's feet, just to show them that this is what it means to be Christ. We show up. We make them look. Come on, you know. This is the real. The real men are showing up now. The real adults in the room are showing up. I don't want to use these words silly, but I mean it's true. I mean it's like let's show these wannabes how it's done. Stop with this weak mindset of fleeing for the hill. I mean, there's a time to flee for the hills. I mean, if it gets acutely bad, I mean, you know, Jesus said, go to the hills. Sometimes you got to go to the hills, but if it's not all done yet, you come back down from the hills when you when the summer of love is over and you get back to work, you know, trying to clean up the town.
That was one thing I was thinking about earlier that I don't think I said this, that with the growing up in a Protestant denomination that is so fixated on the end times to the point where this world hardly even matters. There's it generates this hopelessness, kind of this. It generates a form of nihilism about the day-to-day life, because it's like, well, this world doesn't matter. What's the use of trying to save? What's the use of trying to innovate? What's the use of trying to explore? What's the use of trying to study the stars or examine geological evidence of things, or what's the point of all of this? Because this world is going to pass away. All of this stuff is just fleeting and temporary. But that's not the world that the Bible describes. That's not the world that the church has described for 2,000 years. This world was created and it was called good. God created this world and said it is good. So by exploring this world, by fashioning good things out of this world, we're quite literally participating in the act of creation through Christ, with Christ.
That's right.
Random username here said $10 super chat. See, this is real bucks. He said, I think modern Christians are reluctant on the technology Bible merge arguments because it's embraced by atheists who believe the ancient alien mythos that God was just an advanced alien. You have any thoughts on that?
I'm sure there's a lot of excuses to stay on the plantation.
Perfectly said. 10 more Rubucks here from Jason. He said, we don't fear death, we fear judgment, which is symbolized by the cross. And then let's get down to the next one. We got a $5 super chat from AJ Alonso. Appreciate you, man. And I think that's it. All right, so we passed the bucket back around and
one more time. We got to pay rent. Got a water bill coming up.
Right. Speaking of that water bill, how can we make that water bill lower? How can we reduce the cost of the water bill?
That's right.
Yeah.
Desalination, radical technology. You know.
Are you familiar with OTEC? It's let me see what the exact abbreviation is here. It's Ocean thermal energy conversion.
Mhm.
It's a process or technology for producing energy by harnessing the temperature differences or thermal gradients between ocean surface waters and deep ocean waters. Um, it's pretty fascinating. I just encountered it recently, and basically, it's a way that you can you take the cold mineral rich water from deep down in the ocean and you pump it up to the surface, and somehow using that thermal gradient, you can generate really cheap electricity
Hmm.
to the point where it's near zero, while also harvesting the minerals, the mineral rich water down there. You can harvest those minerals and draw them up. One of the most
So there's something for
fascinating,
you to do.
right?
Find those guys that are doing that, put them on your show.
Yep.
And plug the heck out if they need a fundraising or something. Go plug. There's something for you to do. You know what I'm saying? If you want like an incarnational example, see if it works. Test it against other technologies and efficiencies and costs and all the other regulations, all these things, and throw it up against the wall and see if it sticks. That's what Christians should be doing. That's what conservatives should be doing. That's what you should. If you're going to CPAC, you should be talking about that. And it shouldn't be get me elected and we're going to raise funds for OTEC or whatever the heck that is. We're not going to raise government stuff. No, just like, okay, if this thing works, we shouldn't have to use welfare to make it happen. Okay. And then bring it to the masses. That's an example of, that's what we should spend our time focused on. Not every, I mean, it's also, I haven't said it enough, but art is just as important here, but that's another time. That's why I said the gospel technology, making art with that gospel technology infused in it is important too. Extremely important. But that's that. I mean, I've never felt more alive when I'm doing a creative act, when I'm creating fiction or something like that. I mean, it's just like you feel so in touch with your creator, you just feel alive with that. And I'm sure it's the same thing when you're Tesla or whatever, playing around with a Tesla coil in Colorado Springs, you're playing around that. I mean, he's in tune with his creator. Beautiful. It's beautiful. And we've missed it. We've missed it, man. We've turned ourselves into a bunch of Luddites because we're disembodied. We don't have an anthropology. Without an anthropology, then you don't really know what the heck you're supposed to be doing and getting out of the boat, right? So I mean, this is not that hard. I'm not talking about esoteric stuff. I know some of it seems like it because we've been told not to talk about like elemental transmutation. That's a scary word. I mean, it's a fancy word for just a technology that would help alleviate a lot of pain and suffering and lack that people are owned by poverty and the fear and the shadow of death. And we're going to get rid of the shadow of death. That's what it means to throw death into the lake of fire. Is that Africa doesn't have to go, chip away at mines and so forth, or be beholden to all these NGO crookster, little crooks and neo-colonialist little scams and so forth. I mean, everybody else for that matter, right? You know what I'm saying? That throws the death into the lake of fire. We are throwing the death. We're throwing death into the fire in so many different ways. Little things, when someone disrespects you and you don't return it with ugliness, you just have joy of the Lord. The joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord is my strength. Remember that every day. The joy of the Lord is my strength. Every time the news gets you down or whatever, bad news you hear about personal health or anything like that, the joy of the Lord is my strength. And that allows you having that joyful lightness of being, allows you to not be, drawn down by mimetic weight, and fear. So that's something to remember.
We talked about narrative and how human beings are narrative driven beings, that we exist in narratives. I mean, this is all our internal thought process all the time is forms a narrative. We think of ourselves narratively, and you get things like using the easy example, Ray Peat with the seed oil situation. This is the proliferation of seed oils and their toxicity is a narrative driven phenomenon. It was narratives, it was marketing narratives that were used. It was deliberately manipulated scientific narratives that were used to put them in there.
Good point. So what is that? That's mythology driven technology.
Yes.
See? There
yes.
you go. Good.
Yes. So that's telling stories. This gets back to, you can look at all of history this way. They say the victors write the history books. Well, that's not entirely true. The people the victors pay write the history books, because the victors always pay someone else to write the history books for them. So the scribes write the history book. Who are the scribes working for? They are representing an interest.
Yeah,
History
media-
isn't a
That's what I
history
say
isn't a science.
when people say, "Oh, media has never been like such a stenographer for power," and I'm like, no, it's always been.
It always
Media
has been.
always
Yeah.
been the priestly and scribal caste writing down mythology. Why are we ripping out your son's heart, sir? Because the God demands it. Here, see him raw.
Yeah, right.
That's their job. That's CNN's job. Why are we killing your grandma? Because the FDA and CDC said so. It's the same dumb motion, right? It's the same
Right.
stupid, unthinking motion. And we're like, oh my
Right.
goodness, it's so shocking. It's like, no, the only thing that was different was that like actual investigative journalism that like goes where the facts are. That's incarnational, objective truth,
Right.
penetrating the the forest of pagan mythology in the form of telling truth to power. That's the unique thing that Christianity brought to the table.
Right.
Okay? Not
So-
in the service of empire like Zoroastrianism was. Man, I'm going for it now. I'm going to
5
get you
people are
banned
gonna
off
be
of
angry.
YouTube now, man. We're going hard against them today. Not in the service of an empire, trying to bring the light through force, but the light of the world coming through the expulsion of the stone the builders rejected. There we go. Tying it right back. It's dancing, man. We're dancing in the art of God's creative power. Somebody said they want me to do Alex Jones voice. There you go. And it depends on the day, man. It depends. Like if I have a scratchier voice, it'll just naturally come out, and then somebody thinks I'm like imitating it. It's like, no, I mean, it just depends on the day. But I mean, Alex Jones, an example. He's an example of. I'm going to give him a shout out because he actually has the audacity to talk about like wild and crazy technologies. He's not afraid of it. But the problem is because he has taken on the brand of wild conspiracy, right? Then that marginalizes the conversation, right? So I come and I interview people like Jordan Peterson and I still talk about crazy technology, right? So I'm trying to take it from a level where it's like you can't marginalize it as well. You know what I mean? It's like here I'm intellectually engaging with the philosophies of the world. And then also, well, here's what we can do with that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because one mistake I think Alex Jones does is not him, but his whole like his media thing is always like, well, here are secret technologies that you could have, but the government keeps them from you. Right. And that's another excuse to stay on the plantation. Don't try. Don't try because you'll get assassinated or whatever. See what I mean? So no.
Right.
There's that learned helplessness again. That's not. No, we're not doing that. We can't do that, man. We can't do that stuff anymore. But you see what I mean? The only time you're able to talk about Tesla tech is in some kind of like, hidden secrets. And it's like, some of that might be not true. Some of it might be true, but you see how it's all a stronghold, a mindset stronghold of like, we can't do anything because they're going to kill all the inventors that do great things. Okay, well then enjoy your decline. I mean, it's
if they're going to kill you for your diligent Christian work, then so be it. If anything, all they're going to do is just enshrine your work all the more. If you're going to look at it just purely from a pragmatic perspective. But this is what all the saints of the church, many of them were scientists themselves in their own right. They were the people who were undertaking this. And sure, they're at odds with the rulers, the leadership of their time. And many of them were grievously tortured and murdered. And they strode right into it and accepted it, took it on. If anything, they're like, awesome. I get to experience the next life now. This is my time here is done. I've fulfilled my responsibilities. I've fulfilled my duties here, and it's time to move on. There's something to be said for talking about some of these sort of taboo or kooky ideas and being a normal, decent person, not having the veneer of kind of being a bit of a loon, but just being a normal, respectable person, particularly if you can actually live the life of a normal, respectable person. If you can build your human capital such that you are objectively perceived as a serious, sober, valuable person to your community, to the people around you, then you will bring that baggage, so to speak, into these other ideas as you talk about them or as you present them. And that's what makes ideas,
Yeah,
human beings, we just follow that.
yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. If you build role models, right?
Right.
Another way to look at it is if you build role models who are people like, like a Tim Tebow who is modeling, he's not, and I know they make fun, but it's not. I mean, think about, he's a figure that millions of people emulate for his values, for chastity or whatever like that, right? So
Mhm.
if you could be that kind of a figure and create anti-gravity or create the new physics
Right.
paradigm, that comes with its own, a collective imitation. Just like when Jesus says, be my body on earth, he's not saying that in an esoteric sense that's different from the rest of the world. All of the world is made up of bodies of people. Like Jay-Z
Mm.
has a fandom. That's his body, his corporal body, right? See what
Right.
I mean?
Right.
They,
Right.
they live in the dominion of his modeling, right? And so Jesus does the same thing. It's just a body in competition with those rip-off bodies, those wannabe bodies of Jesus, right? You see what I mean? Like these
Mhm.
stars create their little fandoms or fiefdoms or whatever, which are just corporate bodies in imitation of their worldview that they're modeling. So if we want to win the culture, we have to be the so-called Einsteins and Teslas and Wright brothers and Ford, right? We have to be that now. And
Mhm.
if you do that, little kids will grow up and say, I want to be that.
Mm.
And what comes with that package, what makes you smart, just like Hulk Hogan, say your prayers, eat your vitamins, right? No
Right.
seed oils, loving your family, self-sacrificially, not hungry for money, not staying over too late in the office because you want money, but finding a way to have that good balance between your family and all these are things these are art. This is art. This is not a recipe. We're not going to give you an instruction. If you need an instruction, you're not going to be able to do these great things.
Mm.
You have to,
Mm.
that's what it means. The first stone of nonviolent creativity. That's what it means. The divine spark. That's it, man. I mean, it's the divine spark. It's being able to imitate the right collection of people and the right ideas and the right timing with God's spirit infusing it all. That's what innovation looks like. And it's not just that you get people to want to be like you or an awe of whatever you do because they think you have high social status. That's the earthly way that will move the normies towards us. But it's also you do it for the sake of its own beauty, right? That's important to remember that. You're not doing great movies because you want people to make you a millionaire and that may come or it may not. You may be slandered. So don't see what I mean? Don't idolize it.
Right.
That's another good advice. To put this back in the advice section that you asked me to give people a takeaway. Don't idolize. Well, if I become a great artist or filmmaker, I'll get the fame and then I'll show people Jesus because that might be setting you up for a big scandal on so many different ways. So don't idolize that, and it may not come, but that may be a burden that God gives you, and it is a burden to be seen as a social status role model. You're in severe trouble now. You're asking for trouble and blessing maybe if you can handle that load. But do things beautifully, make a good business or make good art or make good family for its own sake. No one's looking because that's the beauty. That's the glory. Because that's what you're designed to do, right? So you make the anti-gravity not because, well, this will help us beat the empire. I mean, it may. You do it because it's beautiful in and of itself, and that's what you were designed to do as a created image of God. You know what I mean? You're playing with his sandbox, which tells his story and everything, including the beauty of watching something float to move. That in and of itself is incarnational Christian beauty changing the world. That's how beauty changes the world,
You can have your anti-gravity machine in any color you want as long as it's black.
Yeah.
All right. I just got a work email that came in that I got to respond to. So I appreciate you staying on. And this is a great conversation. Let's do this again.
All right. Take care.
You gave your plugs to Neighbor's Choice. And then if you guys can like and share this stream, that would be fantastic. We're trying to get the channel spun back up again. And all of your interactions really helps. I appreciate all you guys. Got a super chat here, $2.20 Canadian from the Dentist 27. Appreciate you. Appreciate all of you guys in here today. And we'll be back. I think I'll do another stream again tomorrow, starting Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future by Father Seraphim.